So the first things first, what we're going to do is at the very top, under the define, we're going to include, this is a PHP function, and in a string, functions.php file. So this says include the functions.php file within this page. We're going to need to call that the values and whatever is in this PHP file. Now all of this if statement, cut that and then clean that up, save, and now you're going to want to go to your functions, and basically we're going to create a function with that information. So we need to start, then functions.php, and then paste what you coded in the previous page. But before we say all is good, we need to make sure to not include this if is set. We're going to keep that in our previous page. So cut that out and make sure to delete its closing brace at the bottom here so we don't have that. So save this. This is what it should look like. Functions, and you should have basically just the function itself. And we're going to add this to a function. So it should look like this. Function, and we're going to call it check for clickbait, and then open a curly brace at the very, very bottom, close a curly brace, and then tab everything in so it looks clear that it's part of that function. So there we go. We have a function called check for clickbait, and basically it will do what we coded already. We've already done the work. Clickbait, the arrays, the string to replace, and everything is good to go. Now we need to save, go back to clickbait, and in your PHP script up here, you're going to want to call that function that we just added to our functions.php. So because we've had it included here, we can call that function very easily, like so. If, now remember, if is set, post, fix, submit. So here we have that. And in here, you simply just call the function, like so. Check for clickbait, and then your parentheses, semicolon. Now it will say, if this has been submitted, call this function from functions.php. So that is a lot cleaner because now it's separated out here. Now we have to deal with the PHP down here. So basically what we'll need to do is take this PHP, leave the is set, unlike last time we forgot to leave that. So just take the content to the code within it, the if statement, and leave the if statement there. Cut that out, save, go back to your functions, and then go down. After that function, we're going to add another function there. So function, and we're going to call it display honest headline. And then parentheses, open and close your curly brace, and then paste that PHP that you copied in the previous page. And so basically, this you'd think would work, because now if we go back to our clickbait and we just call that function, which would be, you would say display honest headline. Technically, you think that this should work. So why don't we try it to see if it works? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paste a clickbait headline, make honest. Now what happened? It's not showing what we coded. It's not showing the original or the honest headline. So what's happening here? Why isn't that working? Well, because we now have incorporated functions into the mix. We have all that PHP in two different functions, check for clickbait and display honest headline. These two functions don't really talk to each other. So this function is asking for the clickbait variable, which we set up here. But this function is local to just this function. Meaning it doesn't exist outside of it. Now, the solution to that is fairly straightforward, but I'm here to show you how to do that. We just need to be able to tell this function or pass those functions, the variables into this function. So we need clickbait and honest headline to be able to be passed in here. Now, how in the world do we do that? Well, let me just show you. So basically at the very bottom of your first function, you need to return an array of the variables so we can access them globally. So you use the return function here, and we need to return an array, and that array is going to have clickbait, comma, honest headline. And now that array will be returned globally so that we can access them outside of this specific function. Now what we need to do is go back to our clickbait.php, and in this if is set PHP script, we need to do a little bit of PHP. So first thing we need to do is get the first value from that array returned by the check for clickbait function, and then store it in a variable. So we're going to create a variable called clickbait, and this isn't the same one as the previous one. You can call this really anything, but we're going to call it clickbait to be consistent. And then we're going to call the check for clickbait function like so. But then because it's got an array passed with it, we need to use the square brackets there, and we're going to call 0. That's the first value in that array. So back here, we returned the function here. So check for clickbait, we're looking for the first value in that array, and that's how we did it. So now we have the first value stored in clickbait. Copy that, paste it, essentially change the variable name to honest headline. And then we're checking for clickbait again function, but we're using the first or number 1. So technically the second value in the array returned by the check for clickbait function. And here's the note. Okay, so now we have that. What do we do? Basically, we call the function, but we need to pass 2 arguments within the function. So call function and then pass 2 arguments in the function. So that's what these parentheses are for. We're going to call or pass clickbait and honest headline. So we pass 2 arguments in the function here. So now when we call this function, display honest headline, it's going to pass the values of these variables in with the function itself. So now when we're down here, display honest headline, we can now pull those in and actually get access. So I know it's a little bit of a wraparound way, but that's the way you would do it. And I'm sure there's a few other ways using global variables and whatnot, but this is a pretty straightforward way of doing it. So now in this parentheses here, we need to actually call those parameters in. And now you can use any variable name you want. So you can call it X and Y, or you can call it foo and bar, or you can call it the same. But instead of being too confusing with the variable names, I'm just going to show you X and Y. So it needs to have 2 parameters passed in. And because we passed in the 2 arguments, we now have access to what was passed in there. So the first one will be X, and the second one will be Y. Now, like I said, this could be called clickbait and honest headline, but it doesn't really matter what you call it as long as it's passed in 2 parameters and you have them here. So this parameter X has the value of clickbait, and Y has the value of honest headline, which we pulled from that array that we returned in the previous function. So do you see how that works? So now we should be good to go. So let's check out our little app here. These kids were attacked by a racist. You'll never believe who stopped. These 2 kids were attacked by a racist. You won't really be surprised by who stepped in to protect them. There you go. It works. So that's basically how you would separate your PHP into a separate file. Good practice. So now we have a functions file here with the 2 separate functions. The biggest trick was returning the array of the variables so that we can get them globally, which we pulled back in here. So we got that array, the values of the array right here. We passed it the 2 values as arguments in this function. It looks for it in this function right here. So this function actually requires those 2 arguments to be passed in as parameters. And so that's how you would do that there. So this function requires 2 parameters. The values of the parameters will be the values of the returned array in the previous function. So that we got access to those variables. Here they are here in display honest headline. And that is how you program a PHP application that makes your clickbait headlines a little less clickbaity and a little more honest. If you're a little confused by all of that, I totally understand. We kind of went a little bit more advanced here, but I wanted to give you something fun to work with. Feel free to go through the lecture again and play around with it, modify your functions, the array here, and just see what you can come up with. See you in the next lecture.